On May 21st, a primary election is likely to decide whether Mike Schmidt remains Multnomah County's district attorney, or if instead the job will be passed on to Nathan Vasquez, a prosecutor working under Schmidt at the county DA's office. Now, running against your boss is a bold move, but Vasquez has the support of many who feel DA Mike Schmidt's progressive platform is preventing his office from prosecuting lower-level offenses and in turn has made Portland into an unsafe and lawless city. And Vasquez has also accused Schmidt of being a bad leader, an absentee boss, and of creating a major rift between the DA's office and law enforcement. Since we've had DA Mike Schmidt on the show a couple of times now to present his side of things, today on CityCast Portland, we're talking with County Prosecutor Nathan Vasquez about why he thinks our city would be safer with him at the helm. It's Thursday, April 25th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. You know, Nathan, you're running largely because you stated you don't agree with DA Mike Schmidt's policies or the way he runs the county district's attorney's office where you work. But the stats coming back are that Portland crime rates dropped in 2023, that homicides are down, shootings are down, even car theft and burglary is down. There's also an upward trend, which he loves to tell us about, of charges being issued by your office for both felonies, which is at an 8-year high, and misdemeanors, which is at a 7-year high. So on paper, it appears like your office is kicking ass and Schmidt's approach is working. Even the police chief has stated, like, we are seeing some progress. So why change course now?
Well, let's go back here for just a second. There's a couple of big points there that we need to clarify. One is, I'm sure Mr. Schmidt would love to say things are all rosy and great, but the facts are really not that way. When you look at crime rates, particularly this year, well, we'll start with last year. Last year, there's nothing to celebrate about 74 homicides. You know, that is still wildly over what happened before he was in office. And this year alone, we're at, I think we had 2 homicides yesterday. We're at 25-ish. I just read a Wall Street Journal article in which Portland is one of the only cities in the United States that has seen a rise in homicides. We're one of the only. In fact, we have more homicides than Seattle and San Francisco total combined. So I don't think it's as rosy as a picture as Mr. Schmidt would like to say. And then the other big one is the 8-year high. Let's be very, very clear with that number and what he's talking about, because when you talk about the actual number of cases issued, so when we're talking about the justice that victims see, we're nowhere near any highs. You know, in the recent history, we're at low points. I mean, prior to him coming into office, the district attorney's office did somewhere between 12 to 20,000 cases a year. Under him, we've gotten to under 6,000 cases a year. And then you also need to put that in the backdrop of, you know, the reality is we've seen a massive spike in crime overall since he's been in office. And certainly our issuing and our work as the district attorney's office has not in any way kept pace or matched that. It's went in the opposite direction. So I don't see a lot to tout about, you know, positives under Mike Schmidt. But policy-wise, there's lots of issues and problems with his policies, and I'm happy to go through any of those specifics.
Yeah, you know, that is interesting because I feel like right now what we're hearing is a lot of politicking, you know, from the both of you, where policies aren't actually brought up. They're not written down. It's just like, oh, it's a vibe. Like, his vibe is not right for the office. I'm not seeing anything that's actually written down that's just like, well, he's, you know, because, like, let me back it up. Like, you were quoted by the Willamette Week as saying, Schmidt is an absentee boss whose prosecutorial experience is exceeded only by his lack of interest in the day-to-day workings of his office. But yet somehow his influence on your office is so strong that he's blocking you and others from doing the work, or, you know, generally keeping the tone and the policies that you want to be doing. Like, how can both be true?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to some of the policies or legislative approaches he's taken that have really kind of hurt us. I mean, here's one example. You know, he was a big proponent of ending cash bail, which I'm going to start by saying, in theory, there's a lot of value to that general theory. We don't want to hold people in custody just because they can't afford it. So I think we can all agree that that's valuable. But what happened is he used that and pushed it forward to create a system that it created a revolving door around the front of the jail. And we've seen just a massive spike in individuals who are committing crimes over and over and over again. And that's one of the ways in which, I think I've seen him push out something that's really dramatically hurt the office. The other one was he came out very strong when he was elected in 2019 and put out a very clear message. It was that he didn't want to prosecute misdemeanors. He didn't want to, prosecute what he called nonviolent felonies, like things like car theft and that. I mean, that was kind of his campaign approach. That was what he was putting out in his messaging. His first actual written policy was to tell police and everyone, here are all the things I'm not going to prosecute. And that was his protest policy. And so these were things that, this is when he's starting off, he's just telling everyone, here's all the things he's not going to do. And so out of that, we saw, a massive drop. Now, certainly, I want to be fair, right? Mm-hmm. Because, there was COVID in there. And so certainly that dropped a lot of numbers. And so I'm not here to say
yeah, it wasn't just COVID. I mean, it was a ton of stuff that made the entire office basically have to clear the slate in a sense because nothing was able to come through. Not only was it COVID, it was the George Floyd uprisings. It was a lack of hands at your office. There was just a lot going on.
Let's talk about the lack of hands, because the lack of hands, that was in part greatly driven by Mike Schmidt as well. I mean,
explain. Because
we had a mass exodus of attorneys. We lost somewhere around 40 during his term. And, and these were experienced, very good attorneys. And, yes, there were a few that retired, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is multiple attorneys leaving over and over because they were dissatisfied with his approach, the way he was managing the office, those types of things. And it created a situation where, you don't have that kind of skilled professional office. We have a lot of young, talented attorneys, which I'm very excited for and I really enjoy working with. But, you can't replace, 5, 10, 15 years of experience overnight. And so that has a huge effect.
Yeah. You were talking about the cash bail and he didn't get rid of it completely.
Yeah.
So I just want to point that out because saying he got rid of it is it's saying something completely different.
No, you're absolutely right, Claudia. And what happened is worse, is that he created a system where it gutted the cash bail system and then left all these massive loopholes. And that's why, we're seeing these situations where, I had a case just a couple of weeks ago where police called me up and said, hey, we've arrested this guy for the 9th time. The 9th time, dealing fentanyl with a gun. And none of those previous cases had been actually adjudicated or dealt with. He just kept kind of cycling in and out of custody.
And how is that Schmidt's fault, though? Isn't that your entire office is doing at that point?
No. And so this is what it comes down to, is that when you take the bail system, which you did under Senate Bill 48, and you gut it in a way that it basically, it doesn't have the provisions necessary to give judges the tools, to give the everyday prosecutor that's going into court the tools to say, hey, there's a massive problem here. This individual keeps getting out over and over. We need to be able to put something in place to hold this person in custody. And that's a single example, but it's something that we're seeing repeatedly over and over in lots of different areas, even in very violent crimes.
Yeah, because when I spoke to DA Mike Schmidt about that, he made it seem like that was up to the courts, that you guys have nothing to do with that. That's up to the judge. That's the judge and the sheriff. Because I did speak of several repeat offenders that were let go, and then they, of course, committed heinous crimes. And he was just like, not me, bud.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, that's kind of what we hear a lot from Mr. Schmidt is it's not me. It must be the sheriff's office. It must be the judges. It must be someone else. There's always a reason. But what we don't hear is any accountability for, this was a bill he pushed. It was one that he went down to the state legislature and testified on. He certainly campaigned on it before that. And then the other thing is, okay, let's say, he's not going to take accountability for what he did. Fine. How about he has some leadership and says, because this isn't like an overnight new problem. We've had this for almost 2-3 years now. Why not go down to the legislature? He certainly is big on doing that, and go down and actually correct this and help the community when we're seeing these massive struggles. And it really comes down to too many people getting victimized when they just shouldn't be victimized.
Mm-hmm. You've been quoted as saying that a good prosecutor can make the streets safer, and that you're going to take a more hands-on approach to fighting crime. What does that mean exactly? Are you suiting up? Are we having a Batman?
I mean, I'll tell you, I have my regular work, and I always say, go talk to law enforcement officers. I'm out there, I'm with them. Not now. Obviously, I'm being very careful, and I'm not interfering with what they're doing. But when they go on search warrants, I go in, and I want to see what's going on. I want to understand. I go out with the bike officers on a regular basis because I want to see the effects of what's happening with fentanyl. I want to be there so that I have that firsthand knowledge. And it's something I train all of the young attorneys I supervise is get out there, get to see it, because there's two massive parts. One is, as a prosecutor, you get very educated and are able to speak with a lot of authority when you go into court. And that's massively important. But the other thing is you build these relationships both with the community, but with the law enforcement officers, so that when it comes time to, hey, I need to build a case, or there's a problem over in the Lentz neighborhood, and you know who the officers are to contact, you know what's going on in that area, you know the community-based organizations around there that could help give support at times. So that's what I always preach, is having those individuals really get out there to help the community by being present. It's getting out from behind the desk and really being a part of the solution.
Right. What you're suggesting is that you will, as the DA, actually go out on patrols. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean,
because that seems like a lot of time. Like, I don't think that you're going to have that time.
Well, I mean, I can tell you I do. I mean, I go out. It's not that I'm out every night. I mean, let's be realistic, okay. Right? But it is certainly having those check-ins. It's going to roll calls. It's all of that. And what I'm telling you is, it comes down to investment locally, investment of time, of that personal capital. But, a lot of it comes down to experience and knowing how to really deliver.
Deliver what now?
To deliver on these kind of very important public safety matters, like, hey, we're coming up on a huge challenge, which is going to be, how do we deliver on, the amendments to ballot measure 110? I mean, that's going to be a huge challenge, right? And and you're going to want a DA who wants to have that hands-on, on the ground effect, because for a healthy community where we're helping individuals that are struggling with substance abuse disorder, for the first step is, don't have a situation or environment where every time they walk outside, someone's trying to hand them fentanyl. I mean, that's number one. But number two is, having worked with people for over 2 decades that are dealing with various substance abuse disorders, you need someone that understands about, meeting people where they're at. And it starts on the streets. It starts when people are just maybe taking baby steps towards treatment. And it really talks about, how do we create a supportive network around those individuals to help?
For 100%, I feel like that's what everyone is trying to figure out on every level of public service. And you're saying that DA Mike Schmidt is not putting in the hours with the officers helping build these cases. But I mean, isn't that not his job, really? Because he's like the boss of you guys, and that's what you guys do?
Well, I would say, if you're the boss of of being the district attorney's office, your job always should be, number one, should be community safety. When this is the most serious, pressing community safety issue that we're facing, I can't believe that we would ever expect a leader to not be hands-on involved. And this is one of my biggest kind of frustrations, is that, fentanyl, it was just declared a crisis in 2024. In 2022, we had over 500 people overdose and die in Multnomah County, and then over 600 in 2023. Why is it just now a crisis?
But that was Governor Kotek who had to. She's the one who was like, all right, let's call it a crisis, right?
Well, I think it was the county, actually, locally, that started to call it a crisis. And certainly, as the top, law enforcement official that's elected, that should be one of your roles, is going to the county and saying, this is a massive issue. We need to address it. I mean, as the DA, you have a direct line and a lot of communication with the county chair, with others. You have a lot of discussions with the governor's office. You are, I think, viewed as really the subject matter expert. This is something I know that our community members were seeing every single day. And what I was shocked is, I work downtown. And I try to get out in the community in various areas. And particularly with the campaign, obviously I'm out. And the more I talked to folks, the more I realized, and then it was kind of verified, is that when the county put together a dashboard of overdoses, this is diffused throughout our county. And it's something that is, this issue is something we're struggling with overdose deaths, really all over the county. And it's a huge challenge, but it's one that's going to take some really, serious hands-on work.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that on January 30th, 2024, the state of Oregon Multnomah County and the city of Portland each declared a 90-day state of emergency. So
Yeah.
it wasn't just like the county. I mean, it seemed like it was a coordinated effort, and DA Mike Schmidt was part of that group as well, you know?
I see the local, the county, and I see that. But it's, again, my core issue concern is this has been a crisis for a lot longer than just 2024.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it wasn't just like solely on the shoulders of DA Mike Schmidt. I mean, like that should have been a thing that like the city and the state, like that should have happened 2 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fully agree with that.
All right, well, let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, can a county DA actually help bring down homicides? So let's talk about homicides specifically, because Portland recorded, as we just discussed, 73 homicides in 2023, which is down from the record 95 homicides in 2022, still very high. Do you really believe that the DA can directly affect the murder rate? If so, how? We vote you in and the homicide rates drop?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's not going to happen overnight, as much as I would love it to. But
I mean, it's not happening overnight, but it is happening. It's going down, you know?
Well, again, I want to stress 2024 is not looking good. I mean, we're on pace to go back up again this year. We have had more homicides this year at this time than we did last year. And what I always want to kind of center and focus on is, for my entire career, really, until 2020, our homicide rate bounced between about 20 to 30. Somewhere in that range, maybe a few more, a few less some years. And why I believe that is that, I'm a huge proponent of, yes, the DA does have an effect on that. And how is by being active out in the community. Because if you want to affect the homicide rate, you have to have a strong program of working with community-based organizations who are interdicting with violence. For years, we had a very strong program, up in North Portland. It was called the Community Peace Collaborative. It was run out of the mayor's office, and it was certainly one where the DA's office was heavily involved. So were law enforcement, and so were community organizations. I myself created an organization out in Rockwood, so that's kind of out far east in one of our most diverse communities called Renew. But then the other most direct and positive way that we have an effect is it's about being aggressive when it comes to gun crimes and gun violence. Where we're seeing huge, massive issues right now is that we have cases where we're seeing murders, we're seeing shootings, that the individual that commits this crime is out on release from cases where they had, been arrested for being a felon in possession of a firearm. And that's, these cases and working with that, that's where you want your DA's office and law enforcement really getting out there, really, focusing on these individuals. And if they're going to get out of custody pending trial, there needs to be serious supervision. And that's another big part that I'm a proponent of is because in 20 years talking to folks like this, they just, what I hear is they're out carrying guns because, sadly, they're in a cycle of violence.
Yeah. DA Mike Schmidt ran on a campaign of restorative justice and keeping more people out of the criminal justice system. You mentioned the misdemeanors and, clearing them and that. But he was voted in with like nearly 80% of the vote. So he had Portland on his side. But then the pandemic hit, like we spoke of, the George Floyd uprisings, and, the courts became flooded with cases. And we talked about how there wasn't enough hands, and you blamed DA Schmidt's leadership with that. But the Oregonian published that the exodus came from crushing caseloads, So if we go forward with your plan of like, okay, let's enforce these misdemeanors, which I know they are being issued, but like, do you have enough people now? If people were leaving because of the caseloads, how are you going to like do your plan, like continue with what you're thinking about if there's not enough people there?
Well, I mean, let's look at where we're at. We're at about, I think we have around 94 attorneys. Throughout my career, when I started, certainly we had about 100 to 102. That was the most I've ever seen was when I started. That was 20 years ago. But I can tell you, over the past 20 years, we've seen lots of ebbs and flows and lower numbers. But during that same time when we had, numbers down in the, 80s for, about 80, 85 attorneys in the office, we were handling close to 20,000 cases. And, when we're talking about misdemeanors, it's not that one misdemeanor or even 100 misdemeanors takes a massive chunk of DA resources, because we actually had this program and what you design out and what we were using regularly was the community court system. And the community court system was really a wonderful combination that it brought both accountability and compassion together. And it was individuals come in, they committed things like, small thefts, disorderly conducts, things of that nature. They do community service, and then they could get their case dismissed. And it turned over a lot of cases, and it produced a lot of community service. And so it had that kind of that dual effect, accountability and compassion. And, prior to Mike Schmidt, and when we had community court, I'll just say that, we're doing about 4,000 cases a year through there. Now, I think the percentage went down by like 95%. I mean, essentially, community courts are non-existent right now. And
well, what's stopping your office? Like, why did it stop?
Again, I want to always be fair, and which is certainly COVID had a massive impact on that. And it kind of went away during that time. But there hasn't been any desire or leadership to bring it back and to say, hey, let's build this system back up. Multnomah County actually was the national leader when it came to community courts. If you look into this, neighborhood prosecution and community courts, if you do any research online, what you'll see is going way back into like the 90s, we were the national leader. And for years throughout my career, people would come from all over the country to come and see what we were doing and try to replicate it in their own communities. And so it's something that, is an effective tool. It is an opportunity to really kind of have that both accountability and compassion. And it actually, you get through a lot of cases in an efficient manner.
Yeah. There's a sticking point whenever we speak about that time. Like, so much stuff got screwed up. We're just trying to rebuild from that post-pandemic, George Floyd uprisings, the courts being flooded, not enough hands. Because many lower level offenses were dismissed, people kind of see that as like the starting point of like Portland's decline, But that was like a lot of extenuating circumstances. People tend to go back there, and I'm just asking, like, what would you have done differently?
Well, a few things. Extenuating circumstances, however, all fully in line with what he campaigned on, what he said he was going to do. It shouldn't come as a shock to anyone. His very direct campaign in 2020 was to basically either, get rid of as many misdemeanor prosecutions as possible. And so, yes, circumstances occur, but what we saw is, around the state, the other jurisdictions, they picked back up. Washington County, Clackamas County, they picked their prosecutions back up. We did not. And so it comes down to leadership. And, I can tell you, a massive part of that is, there has been a massive and ridiculously large rift with law enforcement. And that's, Mike Schmidt broke that partnership early on, and that has been and continued to be a real problem, in our community.
Yeah, let's go to that. It's an open secret that many people in law enforcement aren't fond of DA Mike Schmidt. Last year, then Police Chief Chuck Lavelle had to email his troops to stop bad-mouthing not only DA Mike Schmidt, but also the city of Portland, because they were openly telling the public that conditions on the streets are the result of your office's reluctance to press charges, which we all know just isn't true. And you've said your strategy is to increase prosecutions by forging this better relationship. Like, how would you do that? Because also, like, Nathan, that isn't true, though.
Well, yes and no. I think that it's not fair to say that just isn't true, because, when Mike Schmidt came out, he's campaigning on, I don't want to prosecute misdemeanors, right? He's saying those type of things. Then he comes out, and his first act as DA is to say, here are all the things I'm not going to prosecute. That protest policy really sent two massive messages. One was to the individuals that were coming down to actually, not really do what I saw, many beautiful, peaceful protests. Those are wonderful, and that's a part of Portland's culture. But then there was another element that would come in and was there to smash windows, start fires, and not do the peaceful aspect of it. And it sent a message to them that said basically they had a get out of jail free card. Now, I'm not here to say that's how it was written in the policy, but that was the message that they received. And I heard it very directly, because guess what? I was out there night after night, every night with, just about, of those 100 nights of protest, I probably was there for 70-ish% plus. I was there a lot. And I heard very directly out of their mouths saying things like, well, you can do whatever you want, but Uncle Mike or Daddy Mike isn't going to prosecute us. That's the words they were saying.
They said Daddy Mike?
Yeah. This is what
they said Uncle Mike?
They were chanting it.
That's so gross.
Chanting it to the police. And then we started actually seeing it in police reports where where they were saying, oh, the protesters were taunting us with this. And so it certainly got to the police officers. And I'll say this, the message the police officers received was that Mike Schmidt did not value them, because the other part was in the policy he wrote in there a lot of hurdles and extra things that had to be done if an officer was injured before we would issue a case. And so out of that, it created a really, really hostile relationship with police. And it was one that, it hasn't improved.
Yeah. Well, you did lead the prosecution to the more serious cases in that exchange. So it's not like that didn't happen. That happened. And you made sure it happened. Like, you took care of that. From what we heard was that, from Schmidt, I'm saying, is that the dismissal of most riot charges following the protests were, one, because there just weren't, again, enough hands. This is before the Exodus. This is like there just wasn't enough people there. And also he was like, they're so lower level. These are people that are just, they have their First Amendment. They have like the right to be there. But you're saying that somehow poisoned the water in a sense.
It did. And, I'm someone that having been out there and prosecuted, I've worked on protest matters for decades. I mean, going back to literally some of the World Trade Center stuff we had in the early 2000s. And, and I certainly did a lot after the 2016 election. And I always start off with, I have seen a massive amount of peaceful protest, and those we should always in Portland, respect that and try to make sure that people can have that. But what I see also is that, there are times when groups come in, and I always say it's from the left and from the right. It's, these extreme groups are on both sides, and they come in and they really impact free speech because of their activities. I mean, I know that when the Proud Boys came to town, people got really afraid and didn't want to come out. You have to look at this from a situation of, is this, are we helping the situation or hurting it? And I can tell you that policy, the way it was rolled out and announced, it hurt the situation. And it really, it comes down to, yes, you have to make, as a prosecutor, good decisions about when a case is going to go forward or not. Do we have enough evidence? All of that. But the way that this was announced and put out was the wrong approach.
I mean, we could spend 40 minutes talking about the difference between how the police treated these protesters and the Proud Boys, but we're not going to go there. That's not the interview today.
Yeah, I mean, Claudia, I would love to have that conversation, because I'm not here to be, an apologist for the police. There were areas where they misstepped, and there were areas where certainly I think they would even tell you we could have done better in this area. But this is the crux, which is I can sit here today and tell you without reservation, we will see these issues arise again. And I believe it's coming probably in, November and January, no matter who gets elected. As much as I fear and don't want to see Donald Trump elected, even if Joe Biden is successful, we saw when there were still violent protests after he was elected. And so this is where you need, an experienced DA who is ready to take this on and really work to make sure that, the extremists on both sides are held accountable.
So let's go back to misdemeanors, because, right now we're talking about what creates these misdemeanors, very specifically, protesting, this, that. But how does enforcing more misdemeanors lead to safer streets? Because especially now with Measure 110, do you really think that that's going to make safer streets, what you're planning? Because what people hear when they hear that, now I'm not saying everyone. Some people are just like, hooray, finally. But there's a bunch of others that are thinking, is this going to go back to broken windows policing?
Yeah, and
because here's the deal. I personally would love if someone started policing these broken windows, because these are a lot of mom and pop establishments whose windows continually get broken, who continually get robbed, and no one's doing anything. And I'm going to say that again. No one is doing anything. Yeah. No one in the office. No one. But what I'm saying is, the fear is that if neighborhoods are policed just by that alone, there's going to be a tinge of racial bias, even though, to be honest, most of the people that are being caught are not people of color. Let's just put it that way. Not in my neighborhood, anyhow. But that is what people fear. When they hear broken windows, policing in the same thing, this progressive fire jumps up. And they're just like, no, all the people of color are going to jail now. Can you explain the difference between misdemeanors leading to safer streets and then this broken windows policing?
Yeah, and Claudia, thank you so much for bringing this up because this is such a critical, important, topic. When we talk about, broken windows theory and kind of where it got off track and what some of the problems were, you have to look at it wasn't actually the hey, people that were breaking the law were held accountable. That wasn't the problem. The problem was over policing of minority groups, and how that occurred was through very aggressive, stop and frisk practices that were put in place by the New York Police Department and others that really kind of fully embrace this. And what I'm telling you is that's not what I'm advocating for. I'm not, I'm looking at this as it's actually just let's just enforce the laws, because right now there is zero need to be aggressive on stop and frisk because it's all happening every day right in front of us. I mean, I talk to folks every day and they're like, hey, I was in the grocery store, here I am, or at Target or wherever, and I'm trying to pay for my goods, and then I'm just watching people with shopping carts full of stuff just walking out the door. And there's this sense of, sadly, kind of, it feels like there's no rules Portland. And that's not a healthy community. It is just about, hey, let's just live by the basic social contract of there are laws. If you're out there and you're breaking the laws, you should be held accountable for that. And when we talk about, the broken windows, what gets too tied up in that is that our small business owners, they shouldn't have to have their windows broken out 8-9 times. And that is like almost,
it's what's happening.
Yeah, it is. And that's not acceptable. And there's nothing, that is, tied into over policing of minority groups when you're talking about someone going and smashing out someone's window and stealing stuff. I mean, those are two wildly different things. Where really the conversation should focus is that we're gonna get into, and we're gonna have to be very careful in our approach when we start doing policing back again on kind of drug use, right? I mean, that's the real crux of when we talk about stop and frisk and are we being equitable and how we're rolling that out. And I can tell you it's something that I care deeply about and I think about. And, I've been, working on and developed this program for the last 5 years. It's called Strategic Prosecution, and it's focused on data. And it is, I can tell you, it's the future of prosecution. And when I'm elected, it's going to be throughout the entire office. And it absolutely is a way in which you're going to be able to very carefully monitor, are we having issues with over policing in a particular area, particularly with a certain subset of crimes, with the drug use type crimes, if those are actually making it into the court system, are we seeing overrepresentation for any one particular group? And that's going to be something I'm going to be very focused on monitoring very closely.
Thank you for answering that. I mean, I think that's what people fear the most. In Portland, it's like these two mounting fears of like, nothing's ever going to change. If something changes, the police are just going to go back to what they were doing, which is clearly, there's data. That's what they were doing. I see that one of your endorsements is from the Portland Police Union. And I know you told Willamette Week back in October that you were hesitant to ask the police union for an endorsement because they're a hot potato.
Yeah, I was going to say that it was a hot potato quote was the exact.
Yeah, this is a quote. They're a hot potato, and a lot of the community has a very skeptical view of the Portland Police Association. So what changed?
Yeah, I mean, looking at that, I really kind of leaned in and I made a decision of, what direction do I want to go? And what I look at is, yes, there are very, very distinct groups out there that don't trust the police. And there are groups that maybe have a little bit of distrust, and there's everything in the middle. And what I decided is, really, as a leader, the best place would be actually to try to bring those groups together. And to do that, it's putting a hand out to each, and it's trying to work and really trying to be that reasonable voice that has, yes, the police officers do have faith and trust in me, and I am fully intend to go to them and say, hey, I need you to come and sit down, and I need you to be at the table to have these at times very difficult conversations and really work on how do we rebuild and repair trust? How do we get back to that place where we're all as a community working in the same direction? And that's really, I believe, where our leaders should be. And so do I want to have their endorsement? Yes. Do I want to have the endorsement of community groups as much as that? Yes, I do. And I can tell you that my effort will always be to work kind of to put a hand out to each and to be a bridge to try to bring that together.
Yeah. Do you think the police union or the Portland Police Association is doing a good job?
All right. Let's see. You're trying to get me in hot water here with the police union, but do they do a good job of representing their membership? Absolutely, they do.
Oh my God, they do a fantastic job, Nathan.
Yes.
I mean, for the community. Let's talk about community. You keep bringing up community safety.
Yeah.
And it's abstract. You know, you talk about your office, but everyone has a part in this abstraction of community safety, including the Portland Police Association.
Yeah.
Are they doing a good job in keeping us safe? Not only from criminals, but from everybody else.
One thing that, I'll say that, is there areas for improvement? There always are. And I'm one that you're not going to hear me give myself an A grade at any point, because I'm always thinking that I can do better. Right. And I believe that, that goes for the union as well. They can do better. An area that has taken far too long, but I do believe that they're on board with and supportive of is body cameras. I believe we should have had those, years and years and years ago.
10 years ago? Yeah.
We shouldn't have been the last, kind of major jurisdiction to kind of be limping into this. And they are supportive of that. But at the same time, when we're talking about people that we are entrusting to enforce the law, I do believe that they are held to a higher level of accountability. I do believe that they need to be highly trained. I know right now that they get a ton of training. Are there areas in which we can either alter that training to be more responsive to the community? Absolutely. And those are areas that as hopefully a trusted voice, both in the community and with law enforcement, that again, I can bridge that. I can't direct police in the sense of, hey, you need to do this training, or hey, you need to do that. But I can certainly be that reasonable voice, asking for them to come along when we have tough issues.
Okay. All right. This might be the most important question.
Ooh, all right.
Have you heard of 503 Day?
503 Day?
Yeah.
Whew. Well, I have to sit here and say I haven't heard of 503 Day.
All right. Well, it's okay because we made it up. So 503 Day is May 3rd. That is going to be Portland's holiday. We are pushing for this. Don't you think we need one?
Yeah, I like it. And we have May the 4th, which is the kind of Star Wars one. This will precede it, and it fits very well with our area code. So I'm all for it.
Sweet. So we've been asking our guests, this is a new holiday. We're trying to come up with traditions. We're trying to figure out what the rules are, if any. I mean, it's Portland. There probably won't be any. We're asking everyone, how will you be celebrating 503 Day? Being a Portlander, give me your idea.
Oh, for me, it would be all about going to a small business, either to shop at a small business or to go to a restaurant. Because for me, I love Portland's restaurant scene. I love our food carts. I love seeing the food carts that then go into brick and mortar, and then, all the different ones out there, from Con down to Porque No to all just the wide variety of that. For me, 503 would be take your family to, a small business, particularly restaurant, because it's part of my family cultural tradition, which is, we show a lot of love through food and cooking. And so, that's really important to me.
So food.
Yes. Food.
Yes.
I'll say that I show love through food, and I experience community through food. And so
we would be celebrating Portland's holiday through food. What would be the food immediately? What's the one food that you're this is it, Portland? This is our meal, baby.
Oh, man. It's so hard to pin me down on
These
one.
are really tough questions. I know. We went to school for this, Nathan. Watch him squirm. Watch him
it's
squirm.
Good thing, 20 years of doing trials, I'm always ready to be on my feet. I got to go with tacos just because I love it.
Okay, we're doing tacos.
There's an amazing new food cart right down here in Pioneer Square that has these ribeye tacos that are just unreal. And then, but it's always hard for me to say that when I'm but I know if I go to Porque No, they're always just fantastic. So
you're a Porque No guy.
I'm always looking for a better taco. I'll say that.
Same. You know what? Always looking for a better taco. Nathan Vasquez.
Well, I'm just looking for practical, sensible Vasquez. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay. Every Thursday on the show, we like to bring you recommendations for a few events to help you plan your weekend, and here's what we got. The Portland Night Market is starting up this Friday and Saturday from 4 to 11 p.m. You can experience some of Portland's best makers and creators in food, culture, music, drinks, and retail all together for an adventurous evening in the Central East Side. And this Saturday at 6 p.m., Clinton Street Theater is having a special screening of Return of the Living Dead 3, which will also feature zombie-themed drag performances, a Q&A with the screenwriter John Penny, and a sneak peek at some of the short films from the Portland Horror Film Festival coming up this June. I can't imagine tickets won't sell out for that. And speaking of tickets selling out, just a heads up for Avatar: The Last Airbender fans, tickets have gone on sale for Avatar: The Last Airbender in concert at the Keller Auditorium for a November performance that for sure is selling out in the coming weeks. So if you're a big nerd like me, head over to their site. I would hate for you to miss out singing Secret Tunnel along to a full choir and orchestra. That's going to be insane. And finally, a reminder that April 30th is the last day to register to vote for the May primary if you're new to town. The good news is, in Oregon, you can take care of that in a few minutes online. For even more local events and news, sign up for our daily newsletter, Hey Portland. We'll throw all links in the show notes. That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend, rate or leave us a review. It really does help us out. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.